man, just get out there and work hard, sleep good, do the right thing, sort of thing. I think guys burn out because they don't have discipline in these areas, and that chaos takes over. It just takes over.
Welcome to the Pastors Lab podcast, a new resource for helping church leaders think biblically and strategically about the local church. In each episode, I'll be talking with thriving leaders on the front lines of ministries across the nation, discussing best practices, innovative ideas, and healthy habits. I'm Ronnie Parrott, and I believe churches get better when their leaders learn together. If you're new to the podcast, thanks for joining. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date on the latest podcasts. Each week, I'll be joined by a co-host to help me interview our guest. Joining me as my co-host today is a previous guest on the podcast, Josh Powell. Josh is the lead pastor of Taylor's First Baptist Church in Taylor, South Carolina. Welcome back to the podcast, Josh.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Ronnie, and glad to be the best dressed on the podcast today.
Ooh, man, looking slick today with the jacket.
Yeah, right. You got that hobo jacket on.
Well, today's guest is a good friend of mine and Josh's. I think we've known each other for maybe 10 years or more now. He is the senior pastor of Hickory Grove Baptist Church, and most recently, the elected president of the Southern Baptist Convention. Clint Presley is his name. Welcome to the podcast, Pastor Clint.
Thank you, Brother Ronnie. I appreciate you having me after me begging to be on this podcast. We've had everybody here with me.
Oh man, I'm glad you're here. Let me just say briefly, if you are new to the podcast, please subscribe. If you benefit from this conversation, share and subscribe to the podcast.
More commercials.
Well, no, it's great.
No, it's good,
I'm
man.
really glad to have.
Let's do it again.
Have you both
like and share, retweet,
all of it.
Yes,
is
sir.
Twitter a thing anymore? I don't think
know.
so.
Let's get it out there. Re-X the thing.
Hey, listen. This is I know you're gonna say something here. What is that? Is that a train? That Josh's train that goes by every 30 minutes?
I don't even notice. Anymore. So sorry about that. Yeah, I'll try to pay attention to the train schedule.
No, I really have been looking forward to this conversation. It's been really hard getting Clint because he takes like a whole month off after the SBC.
Josh,
doesn't preach, doesn't do anything.
Do you think we should let Ronnie get in the middle of that? Ronnie, seriously, son. Let's talk about how often you go to the beach. Every time I talk to you on the phone, you're riding around the golf cart somewhere at the beach down in Kiawah Island.
Yeah.
I took one vacation this year. Your whole life is a vacation.
2 weeks.
Right.
Hey, I know I really appreciate you both dressing up today. I mean, Clint's in those suspenders looking slick over
not
there.
Suspenders. Farmers wear suspenders. This ain't suspenders. They clip in. You see?
Oh,
They're
my bad.
braces button in. That's what a man wears.
All right.
What you got on, Ronnie? Tell us about that T-shirt you wear.
Both of you, have you?
Let's talk about that $100 T-shirt you got on. Say.
Hey, those
Let's
pins.
talk about that his and her T-shirt you wearing.
His and her.
Oh man,
come on,
this is gonna be a blast.
Let's get
to
all
of our listeners today. You don't know the friendship we share among the three of us. It is a blast. And hey, if you guys don't know Clint, I want Clint to take a second for you to get to know him, telling his story. Clint is a phenomenal preacher. He is one of the best preachers I know. He's a great expositor of the word. And Clint, why don't you tell him a little bit about yourself? Give us the sort of 1 to 2 minute snapshot of the life of Clint Presley.
I grew up here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did not grow up a Southern Baptist, but grew up going to church every Sunday at a Presbyterian, the liberal kind of Presbyterian. And never really heard the gospel except through the Apostles' Creed. And we were visiting a family in Virginia. We met at the beach. We were visiting there in Virginia and Roanoke, and the kind of Baptists that went to church every Sunday, including if you had guests. So they took us to church. First Baptist Church, Roanoke, Virginia. First time I'd ever heard a Baptist preacher. And I thought, good. I was 15. That's the kind of church I want to go to. I didn't know what they believed, but I knew I wanted to go. So I told my mom and dad into going to Hickory Grove. And in the 11th grade, we joined this church. It's my home church, Hickory Grove. And then that started the road kind of discipleship and on to call to ministry and seminary, got married, and made it back. I don't know how much more you want to know. Served, 2 small churches way out in Southwest Mississippi. Served here on staff for 5 years as a preaching pastor. Went away to Dolphin Way Baptist Church in Mobile, and then came back here 2010, and I've been here ever since.
Short answer, Clint.
I understand.
Where did you go to seminary?
Well, now my master's degree, I went to Southwestern first. That's where I met Connie, and then I quit because I didn't like going to school. But then I realized I don't know how to preach, so I started back down to New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Josh.
Got a master's.
Yeah.
So I do understand you did not grow up Baptist. What was it about the Baptist that make you go, you know what, I want to be one of those? I
really actually got saved as a Presbyterian at a camp. God led me to Christ. And so for several years, as 11, 12, 13-year-old, I was going to that Presbyterian church. I had a living Bible, so sort of kind of had the Bible and was reading it, and really thought I wanted to be in a ministry. Didn't know what kind. Even then, that's what I wanted to do, until we went to a Baptist church, and there was a man standing with a book open and saying with authority what the Lord said, and he talked about the cross. He talked about Jesus, and I thought, yeah, I want to do that.
That's great. We're going to talk a little bit about the SBC and Clint's role as the new president toward the end of this conversation, so hang in with us. But, Clint, you have pastored how many churches along the way?
Yeah, so my first church, Clear Branch Baptist Church, Lincoln County, Mississippi. Second one was Thompson Baptist Church in Amite County, so just down south from there. And then third church, I was on staff here at Hickory Grove. Went to Dolphin Way, was the fourth church, and came back to Hickory Grove. So I really have been at 4 churches in 32 years.
Your track record is, I would say, is church revitalization. Every church the Lord has put you in some form, you've had to revitalize it. And talk to us a little bit about Dolphin Way and what it took to sort of turn that legacy church around.
Yeah, Dolphin Way had been through a whole lot. And when we went in 2004, just to back up a little bit, Dolphin Way is one of those genuine legacy churches, kind of one of the first churches on the scene by way of megachurch, when the old category used to use. You had First Baptist Jacksonville, Dallas, First Baptist Dallas, and really Dolphin Way was among them. And for years kind of was known throughout the convention like that, doing all of the recreation, all of those things it took to get people to come in. By 2002 or 3, it really had fallen on hard times by way of how it was growing, because it wasn't. And then the church went through, you could call it a split, but the former pastor left and several hundred people went with him. So the church was left with not that many. And really, I think that's why they called me, not because I was known as a revitalizer, but because they were so desperate nobody would go. And so I had an interest in Dolphin Way and knew of it, and struggled through it. I didn't want to leave Hickory Grove. I was on staff here at the time, and went there to Dolphin Way. And truthfully, there was some kind of blocking and tackling, kind of the Green Bay sweep sort of stuff we did. That if you remember the legacy of Green Bay sweep, they did it so well, everybody knew it was coming, but they ran it so precise and so well that it worked. And so we did some of the regular things that you would do: preaching the Bible, loving people, reaching out, making contacts, and showing that the church was, that it still was a viable body of believers that could grow in that town, in Mobile. And the Lord was kind to keep it alive. And through 6 years of there, really have been some of the best years of ministry for us, like the most fun, I should say, of ministry.
Yeah. Clint, your story is really a lot like mine. I mean, I started out at a small church. I think my first church, 37 people voted on me, and just kind of start out there and then move up. And then the 2 churches I took after that were both broken and hurting churches. Yeah. Talk to me about how you lead, especially at the beginning, lead out with the pulpit. It feels like a dangerous game sometimes, to where, man, I'm just going to preach the word and trust the Lord and make that my primary focus. So just kind of give me, I don't know if it's a philosophy or your understanding of how important leading out with expositional preaching, especially when all of us, Ronnie included, he's a little bit younger, we came up during that church growth movement idea anyway. So pragmatism was kind of taken over, and just give me a little bit of your philosophy, your understanding how you lead with the pulpit and the expositional preaching.
It is sort of a hybrid. I came up really, and I'm older than you guys, that all the heroes, the way you became a hero was your church grew and was big. and regardless of really sort of any kind of deep exposition you might do. And when I was convicted of that being the way to approach church ministry, there has to be more than just what a Puritan did: open in the Bible, preach the word. Spend 12 hours a day in the study, come out, emerge with an exposition that is going to feed people. Yeah, you want to do that. But when church is broken, it's going to take a good bit more. You want to provide leadership from the pulpit, which is, how do you express affection? Like, the church has to be loved. So how do they know that the pastor loves them? How can he show that he is trustworthy? How does he invest into individuals in a mass setting? So how do you take your personality that is useful in a one-on-one setting and expand that? How are you yourself, but bigger in the room? And then really with making sure there is just an absolute positive tone to what you're doing in the pulpit. I think that was something I tried to focus on. How can I convince these people that have been through such hard times that the gospel has given us such hope, not just for salvation, but for this church? And really is some of that kind of blocking and tackling that we did.
That's good. I do appreciate your commitment to expository preaching, not only your ability to do so well, but also I know you listen to a lot of sermons every week.
I do.
You're constantly listening to guys and evaluating. Tell us a little bit, can you give me the idea of what expository preaching is and what it is not?
Yeah, I want to be careful because, everybody wants to be called an expositor and would call themselves an expository preacher. I think exposition is taking the Word of God and explaining it in such a way that is understandable and applicable to your life. So, and then using that to point to the gospel of Christ. So it's not just a running commentary. There's got to be homiletics involved. Like there must be some sort of form to the sermon. For me, I want to have an overarching statement that tells you what this sermon is about, and then all the points that are going to point back to what that statement was, and wrap it up with a conclusion, trying to convince you that what I've said is the truth from the Bible. Now, I think there ought to be a whole lot of saying, well, look back at verse 32, but it's not just me walking through a running commentary. I think that's sometimes where expository preaching gets lost. It becomes running commentary.
How do you balance that, Clint? How do you balance, a running commentary and where there's little to no application? Sometimes in expositional preaching, you'll find our guys just don't ever get to the application part, and that's missing your hearers. So you want the text to drive the application. And at the same time, what you said, I love how you put it, it's got to drive expositional preaching, true expositional preaching from every text drives someone to the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think in our conversations, you've said that 1,000 times to me when you're listening to other preachers, man, you got to get to the gospel. I didn't hear them get to the gospel.
Man, it's amazing how many I listen to that are great, like with the text, and they never get me to the death, resurrection of Jesus. I don't know. I don't get it. I'm sorry. You had a question, Josh. I don't know. You were talking a lot. What did you say?
I was agreeing with you first of all, but I think you're right. I think that's the thing that's different from even a pragmatism of just simply application. The application has to be the gospel of Christ Jesus applied to your life in every way.
But sometimes,
and what are the dangers of that? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to that. I think sometimes if you're pressing so hard for application, then you're going to maybe misrepresent what does the text say. Sometimes the unbelievable truth that you found is the application in itself, that this is so good. I mean, how much application does a really good steak have to have? Just eat the thing. Sometimes it's like that. Now, other times you really have to dig toward it and help people see, and then what difference does that make? Sometimes the difference it makes is that you just have had a really good meal of the Bible that's good for your soul, that's going to strengthen you for the day ahead, all that you've got to face.
Yeah.
So a guy sits down to do sermon prep, and he says, man, where do I start? What do you tell him to do?
So I don't use a computer, write everything out. I open the Bible, I get a notebook, and I go first to the Bible, and I write it all out by hand. I want to see it, read it, start internalizing the text itself. So I write all of that out, and I'll do that on a Monday and start fooling with it a little bit and spend my time there asking God, what does this say? How can I best represent what the truth is here? And I want to internalize the text first in my own heart and mind. And then I want to start working on it. Like I find out what is there. What are the things that I want to see? What are the technicalities? And so if you're going to work in the original language, man, I think that's great. Maybe get a Greek exegetical commentary, do some of that. It's going to be dry as dust, but you're going to find some things that are going to help you build the bones of that. And so work on the skeleton for a little while. And as you're, go ahead. I see you want to say something, Ronnie. You getting ready to say something?
No, I'm listening. No, I'm listening.
Work on the skeleton a little while. And as you're working on that, the Lord uses this word. I mean, you're as you fool with it, you're like, this is so good. There's something here. And so on the edge of my notebook, I'm writing ideas as I'm doing the skeleton work. And then as time goes on, you start to see sections unfold, ideas you might have. You pursue other texts, and you write down thoughts and list out, ways that this might be applicable. And if you do that for a couple of days of doing that, by the time I get to Thursday, hopefully I've come up with at least a good outline and a way I'm going to apply this. And then for me personally, I don't fool with it on Friday. Saturday morning, I'll read over all my notes to internalize them 6 or 7 times in the morning early, then go spend my day Saturday, and then Saturday afternoon, write out the manuscript and get ready for Sunday.
All by hand.
All by hand, yeah. You see these pens, don't you? You see these pens, don't you?
Your pen of choice. What is your pen of choice? I see him.
So all this here is just, this is just for jewelry. You know what I'm saying right here. I like to use I got an Esterbrook that I use, and it's like a utility. It's like the workhorse pen. So I use it. These are really just to make Josh, just to remind him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I like that.
Not shabby over here.
No, it's nice. I see you. It's good, Ron. It's good.
Are those pants that you're wearing, Josh? Do they match your jacket?
Stand up, Josh. Let's see. Stand up, Josh.
I'm too tight. Can't quite get out.
Josh is wearing shorts, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
that's what he's doing.
I would neither confirm nor deny.
At 3:00 on a Wednesday. I mean, what kind of job do you have, Josh? Seriously.
Well, I'm actually technically on vacation. I came in for this.
Oh,
I wouldn't miss this.
That's a bald-faced lie. You ain't on vacation?
I'm at my house.
You're at your house?
Yeah, I'm at my house.
Is this really work, though, Josh? Is this work?
This is pure joy and pleasure. Just two good friends talking about expositional preaching. If I ever talk to Clint and I hear in the background myself preaching, I know I'm in trouble. He has been critiquing, and I'm getting ready to hear. He's been watching my sermons.
Tell the truth, Josh. I ain't never been
so
anything.
bad. He doesn't listen to me anymore.
Oh, I can't make it through a sermon. Look, I ain't been hard on you, Josh.
Josh, no, you haven't. You've been very kind. Okay. You've been very kind and gracious.
Yeah.
So Clint, what age were you when you became your first? Like when you took your first senior pastorate? Was that when you had like the whole fro going on?
What are you talking about?
Up top?
No, dummy.
Did you have all the curls?
So look, I had a flat top haircut. I had a flat top. I played football with that all through college, and my hair started growing a little bit, and my wife saw I had a little curl in it, so she asked me to grow it out, and later on I grew a good bit of hair. Now it's thinning out. I can't grow like that no more.
I'm growing mine out. I'm growing mine out. It's actually
right, like a munchie sitting there.
Yeah.
All right, so you pastored Dolphin Way for several years, and then God calls you back to Hickory Grove to follow legacy pastor Joe Brown as you were the college pastor here back in the day?
No, I came as a singles pastor, and I was terrible at that, and so I thought I was going to lose my job, and they'd let me start preaching, and so I got to stay.
Nice. So describe that transition. I've heard you talk about this transition a lot between Joe Brown and you, two arguably different leaders and pastors and preachers. How was that for you overall?
Yeah, so we are go ahead. I'm sorry. Did you have something else? All right. Yeah, so
I was just going to say talk about it in general.
Okay. So Joe Brown was my pastor. I came up at Hickory Grove, man, and so that's part of like a whole lot of preaching, and what I think about preaching, I learned from him. So growing up, hearing him open and speak with authority, point people to Christ, talk about the Bible as authoritative, as God's word. He was an oratorical giant, honestly, really, really good. at rhetoric. And so learning about language and the use of language there. Also, he was great at using a story to illustrate, to make a point. So much so that sometimes I would remember the story. And so I came through with that view, went off to college. I used to go at college. I would listen to his sermons in the dorm room. Like I'd open my door in the athletic dorm, open my door at night and play his sermons so everybody could hear him. I just had the highest view of his preaching ability. Went off to seminary and got married, started preaching. And when I came back to Hickory Grove in '99, I came on staff, and he was still the pastor here. It wasn't long into my time here back then that we could see that we were on sort of diverging paths. He's 20 years older than me, and so he came through when church growth had what you did was a certain way. And here in Charlotte, Hickory Grove became kind of the church in Charlotte. And there was a certain way you did it with the FLC and all of the ministries, children's and students and all of that. Expository preaching was not high on the list. In '99, it was just sort of starting to make its, in our little world that you're hearing about what that is. And so I was learning that in New Orleans, and I was studying that with other pastors. Even as you read, you have this deep desire to preach the Bible. So when I came back in 2010, I left here in 2004. Okay, you follow along. When I left in 2004, Stephen Rummage followed me. He came here, took the position I had. It expanded to co-pastor. He stayed until 2009. He went to Florida. And at that time, Joe Brown was ready to make the transition out. And there are not any real good books written on how to do it. And so you sort of go in blindly. Everybody we've seen that's done it, there's a time or two that's worked well. I think Clay Smith, those guys did a good job with it. So I came here hoping that since I knew the church and knew Dr. Brown, I had some idea of how it would go. And what was going to be a 4-year process ended up being an 8-month process because you had 2 leaders trying to lead one church. And so I think the retirement was expedited on his own, by his own choice. He wasn't asked to leave or anything. I think he just saw, this is probably not working great. He was ready to go do something different. So he left our church and actually started pastoring another church here in Charlotte. And then went to a church and now he's pastoring still in Rock Hill. So, his son-in-law is still on our staff. I know that I've known the family forever, so they're part of. It's like being in a small community. Like this is really, you've been in a small community. You have ups and downs with people that you've lived with your whole life, and you just learn to live together, even if you don't agree on everything. And that's sort of where that has ended up. Our philosophy,
that's good.
Our approaches to ministry, to preaching, are just different. Some of that's age. Like Kyler Smith is on our staff. He's 20 years younger than me. His approach is going to be different in some regards than mine is. And I think mine is right. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it like this. And, Joe Brown thinks the same thing, too. And so when one leader like that leaves after having such a long run of excellence, we don't have this church without Joe Brown. Like these buildings that we have here, they don't exist without the Lord using that man to draw people not only to Christ, but to this church. And so in many ways, I owe him a lot.
Yeah, and that's tough, Clint, I know, in following someone because you want to honor them and you see changes that need to be made and navigate that. That takes, to me, a peculiar leadership skill and especially leadership instinct. And I don't know about you. I've never been like a leadership guru. I don't read much books on it or anything. It's a lot of instinct that you have to have, I think,
truthfully,
for revitalization, right?
Yeah, I think so. And being able to read the room and trying to pay attention to people, to just the level of emotion, to seeing where the threshold, like sensing where the threshold of change is. Even the way we do staff here, being connected to the staff in such a way that if there's a disturbance in the force over there and you can't see it, but you know something's wrong. And developing those kind of lines of communication have been helpful in reading where the threshold of change is.
Right. Like a discernment that you just innately have.
Yeah.
With it. Which you played. Let me ask you this. Now, I think there's a direct correlation. Now, you may be wrong. You may can prove this wrong.
Okay.
But you played college athletics. You played football, if I'm not mistaken, at Wofford, right?
Yep, that's right.
And so I'm the same. Ronnie didn't play in college anything, but I played college basketball. So I do think for pastors, that idea of team and leadership that I learned there is probably where my instincts were honed and developed. Have you had anybody that has kind of helped you? I mean, I grew up in a time too where we didn't have the idea of discipleship or mentoring, or even there was no such thing as an intern or a resident at any church I knew of.
Yeah.
And so everything was kind of honed in different ways. So what helped you in leadership wise, just kind of get your church experience?
I think that church, seeing the change, some of the changes that need to go on at the church where I am at Hickory Grove, I think team sports did help a lot. I think that helps a lot. I think reading good books, not leadership books, they're usually not very helpful. I think mostly biography and history help like that. And so I think those areas, and really, there are men at our church that are not direct mentors to me, but are 80 years old. So that's the next segment up from where I am, and that I've known forever and want to be like, even though all they've ever done is work hard, love their families, and do the right thing. Well, that's a pretty good addition there.
Yeah.
Clint, one thing that people may not know about you is that, or about Hickory Grove, is Hickory Grove is one of the most diverse churches in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit about leading a diverse people.
It's very difficult.
What are the principles? Yeah.
It's truthfully, very difficult. And then leading into diversity without becoming a proponent of DEI. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So to lead in such a way that you're leading with the gospel and biblical exposition, but also with an eye on how does this play out in our neighborhood here in East Charlotte? Because the neighborhood around us is people of color. And so how do I help the church get there? And I really don't have a good formula, except to say that some of the basics we've done have worked by way of preaching and then I want the church to go from everybody's welcome to everybody's wanted. How do I do that? How do I make them not, we say everybody's welcome, so that's great. Sure, we got that. How does it come across? How do I make it come across wanted? And so that's been one of the questions we've, and I'm not sure how it plays out. The Lord has just been kind in that our approach to worship and the people that have joined our choir, so many of them have been people of color. So there is there is this, when you walk in the room, if you're black, you don't feel like I'm in the wrong place. That wasn't planned. That was just how it's played out as people have joined our church. And the same is true for our school. Our school is 50% non-white. And that wasn't something we were pressing for. The Lord just provided it because it's the neighborhood around Hickory Grove. How then do we use that?
That's K through 12, right?
K through 12, about 800 or so students, K through 12, and it's completely in half.
Also, just the sheer difference in socioeconomic status of those in your church, from rich to poor, all kinds of
Well, we don't have many
diversity.
rich people. It's a pretty working class kind of church. We've got a lot of people, but not many that are rich. It is mostly working class, black and white, and Latino.
That's great.
Truthfully, we have a Latin American congregation, but many of those that have a Latino background are coming to either our Harris campus or Malley Creek.
So all this time in ministry, you have got to have some good stories. Can you share one or two just of your best stories with us today?
Yeah, I don't know who else is going to be looking at this podcast, right? You've got
depends on the story.
You've got me in trouble before when I listen to some of your advice.
Oh man, you got some good stories. I've
Give
heard
us
a
South
couple of them.
Mississippi story. South Mississippi story.
Yeah. So,
What about the cow?
yeah. So, one afternoon, I got a phone call from one of three deacons, a man named Burnell. I said, Mr. Burnell, what you got going on? He said, it's a bad day, preacher. I said, what's the matter? He said, my favorite cow, I'm afraid she's dying. He's a gentleman farmer. I mean, you had 20 cows just to look at. He's probably 72 years old. I said, well, man, I'm sorry to hear that. What can I do to help you? He said, would you come up here and put her out of her misery? I said, Mr. Burnell, I don't know if I can do that or not. I never have really, I mean, I ain't never been hunting. Probably shot a bird one time with a BB gun in my backyard. I had a rifle. Should I bring it with me? He said, no, I got something for you. So come on up here. So I went up to Burnell Brown's. I'm 25 years old. I mean, I've been doing this for a year and a half. Burnell's probably 72 with a flat top. So I ride up to his house, and he's got this 22 rifle, and he says, all right, look, she's laying down over the hill there. It's loaded up with as many bullets as you need. You go over there, she's going to look like she's dead. Just take the barrel of that gun and put it down into her ear and pull the trigger, and you'll put her out of her misery. I said, all right. So I go up the hill, and sure enough, when I come down the other side, there's that cow laying and looks. And so I ease up and I got the gun out in front of me, and I ease the barrel down into the ear of that cow and pull the trigger. And when I do, that cow jumps up on all fours like it's a resurrection. I mean, she jumps up and scared me to death. So I unloaded like the rifleman. I just cocked back and I shot it, every bullet in that gun. And of course, the cow fell over dead, and helped Mr. Burnell with his cow. So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's the kind of stuff I was doing in Lincoln County, Mississippi.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That's amazing. So one thing that Josh and I can tell our listeners right now, we can tell you Clint's routine from what he does when he wakes up to what time he goes to bed. We talk often, and right now we can tell you what Clint does for breakfast, lunch, and dinner almost every day. But here's what I appreciate about you, Clint, is you're such a routine guy. Yep. You are one of the most disciplined men I know. And the question for you is why have you become so disciplined, and how has that helped you? And what would you tell the men on here who are listening who aren't very disciplined?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it really has helped, honestly, because as you get older and ministry expands, ministry is part of it is just managing chaos. It feels like all the time. With a routine, I'll use those two things, routine and discipline. So with a routine, there are some things that are set, that are ruts you can lay down, and you're running in those ruts. And between the two, like a hard routine in the morning, hard in the evening, in between the two, some of that chaos is going to happen, and it doesn't throw me off as much because I know I've got these two rails I'm running on in the morning and in the evening. And you're able, at least it's been my experience, to manage much more of life that happens. And it points you to providence, makes you think of God's sovereignty, and discipline added to that. If you have discipline in that regard in almost all areas, like you want to be disciplined in all the areas, that's going to help manage some of the chaos that we deal with, I think, daily and weekly, and help you not burn out. I mean, I think you guys that use the phrase burn out, or imbalance, or you're looking for that sort of thing, or self-care, which is, whatever.
Talk to us about self-care, Clint.
I don't want to talk about self-care. I think that it feels weird to say. So, man, just get out there and work hard, sleep good, do the right thing, sort of thing. I think guys burn out because they don't have discipline in these areas, and that chaos takes over. It just takes over.
Part of your discipline, Clint, is reading. So you're always on Twitter putting out the book.
Right.
So every night I know exactly what Clint's doing from 9 to 10.
9 to 10, yeah.
And reading books. So you mentioned this in leadership, how leadership books are one thing, but reading good biography, especially history, I think is
yep.
what you like. So talk to me about how do you choose a book How does it come to you? Is it just recommendations, or is there other plan to it?
It's mostly recommendation. Like you see those books right there. That's a stack that I'm going to work through. If you look over here, all those to the left in that cabinet down low, that's the ones that I've read this year. I from all over. I have recommendations from people in the church. Like I just read The End of Everything. Somebody in the church recommended that. Thomas Kidd, he does a pretty good job of putting out recommendations. I'll get probably out of the ones he puts out 2 or 3 out of 10 he recommends. Al Mohler used to do like a summer reading list and it put out 10 or 12 books. He hasn't done that as much. And then oftentimes when I'm reading a book, it'll put you onto another one. Or if I put out, hey, I read this, someone will say, hey, have you looked at this one by that same author? So from the network of people I'm connected with, that's typically where I'll get my reading list.
You have a favorite person in history that you love to read about, or a favorite century in history?
Yeah. So my favorite American to read about is Teddy Roosevelt. I think he's probably, we're going into all the politics now. He's a good one to look back at. And just a great American. He was a churchman. I don't know that he was evangelical, although I think he was a believer. He was a churchman and went through a lot of adversity. And he used hard work and physicality to beat back some of his being prone to depression. I respect that a lot. My favorite, period in history goes back and forth. I got caught over into English history for the last couple of years. I've just been stuck there. In fact, I went all the way back to like the pre-Roman. I'm listening to pre-Roman period now, then the Romano-British, and now coming out of that, what happened with the Anglo-Saxons, and then when the Norman invasion, the Vikings, and all of that. So I've been reading a lot of that kind of stuff.
When you listen to an audiobook, do you count that as reading a book? This is a debate.
I don't count it as reading a book because I'm not actually reading the book. Somebody somewhere is reading that book to me. I think that's a good way to do it. I mean, I'll get the information, but I don't claim, like I won't put on Twitter and say, hey, I just read this. If I use audiobook, I'll say, hey, I listened to this because somebody else read it to me.
Let's shift to talking about your election to the president of the Southern Baptist Convention.
All right.
So, when you think about walking into Indianapolis this last year, you were nominated alongside of several guys, 2 or 3 of which you really knew well.
Yeah.
How was it being nominated alongside of guys you knew and you loved?
Yeah, it was weird. It was unusual. This is the first time I ever went to the convention on a Saturday. Normally I preach and then go after church. It's the first time I've gone and, had guys running for the president. I was running and, had this feel of running against me. I tried not to think of like they're running against me. I had to really say, that is not you personally. It's some of the direction I'd like to see the convention go. So seeing the guys there that were running actually helped a lot. Like once we saw one another, like, okay, it's not weird. They're all good guys. We all, before every kind of, debate or forum, we were standing around talking. In fact, I would have missed one had Bruce and David not told me about it. So that's the kind of friendliness that was going on. Once we're in the room, as it oftentimes is the case for Southern Baptists, once we're in the room, it's not quite as weird as it might feel on social media.
And how was it going back to your church afterwards? And I'm sure your church was super excited for you.
Yeah. The church was great about it. They had during the service, brought us up and congratulated us and gave me an unabridged version of Robert's Rules of Orders, that sort of thing. They were real kind about the whole deal. And then I went on vacation, and now everybody's unimpressed. I'm back, and we're not talking about it very much.
That's right.
That's one thing about being in church for a long time. You find out people are not impressed with you, and that's the way it is here.
Yeah. What's interesting about next year, 2025, is the 100th anniversary of the cooperative program, our unified funding initiative for fulfilling the Great Commission. What an honor you have to be the president during this meeting. Have you already put thought into like what your theme's going to be, put thought into where we're going to go direction or how you're going to celebrate that? Anything you want to share today?
Yeah, I have put some thought into it. I do think that'll be sort of what dominates our conversations. Those two, I mean, to have them both at the same time celebrate 100 years by way of a confession and then our cooperation really speaks to actually our complete identity can be wrapped up in those two things. So I think it'd be really good for us to celebrate that. And as we get closer, we'll talk more about specifics on the theme.
Yeah, I really appreciate your talking behind the scenes about some of these things, how much you've talked about the importance of unity and unifying our convention around the Baptist faith and message and our cooperative mission has been super encouraging to me and Josh. I know Josh has been in the same vein in this conversation along the way too.
Is anything on that same note, which one of my favorite things you said during the whole time, Clint, was, as a people, we should be, the most optimistic, most joyful, and most optimistic. Not in the sense that the world's getting better, but obviously in the sense that we have a Lord who rules and reigns, and we have a gospel to proclaim. And in your, and I kind of like how you set the tone, even in your, after your election, you said in the press, what's one thing that would surprise people outside? And that's the fact that we're actually a joyful people. A lot of times looking in on what we do and just getting the sound bites in the media or social media, it may seem like we're all either fighting, we're mad about something or something else. But in reality, when you're in the room at the SBC, like in Indianapolis, we're a joyful people. So just talk to me about that real quick on how you want to carry out that joy with conviction and with your stances and conviction, complementarianism and cooperation, yet in a joyful tone.
Yeah, I think you probably just said it all. Truthfully, is that if we believe God's word is good and God's word has said these things, you brought up complementarianism. So in the view of the roles of men and women in life and home and church, if we believe that those are good, then we thank God we have good things and we celebrate that which God has given us, and we're not ashamed of it. And in fact, we're the very opposite of that. We're glad of this. We embrace that. We're thankful to celebrate femininity and masculinity and think those are God-given things that ought to be admired and respected and emulated by our students. We do the same with the gospel. And when we think about grace, when we think about forgiveness, so all of those things, when we think about missionaries, the nobility of giving up something to go share the gospel with people you don't know, how that is a good and noble and right and honorable thing to do. Those are traits that we celebrate and think are good for people to see. And I think, most Baptists that I've met, you raise the standard of the Baptist faith and message, and everybody in the room is going to stand and salute that right there. We're glad for that confession. And you go start talking about missionaries, man, we're glad for what we do with missionaries. And I think those two pillars kind of hold up who we are as Southern Baptists. So it'd be good for us to celebrate it next year.
It's good.
Well,
By the way, on the
encourage...
stage, you can't release this, I'm sure, but what will be the attire? Will on the stage, will it just be like collared shirts? Will it be relaxed, button-ups, maybe a jacket, tie, maybe not a tie? How will the dress be on the stage?
My personal dress or how everybody else?
For everybody. I mean, you get to mandate, what it looks like when you come on stage.
I don't mandate that on our staff. So I'm not going to do it there.
So you'll be, will it be three-piece suit the whole time, or have you decided yet?
Seersucker.
I might break out
Wednesday?
I might break it out, one day, the seersucker. I'll probably have a suit and tie on, but that's pretty customary for presiding officer.
Fairly
customary. All right. Well, Clint, I want to encourage all of our listeners today to be at the SBC. If you're Southern Baptist, make plans to be in Dallas, Texas next June. And please commit to pray for Clint. Commit to pray for Clint as he is planning and preparing to lead that important meeting next year. Clint, I want you to know we're thankful for your leadership. Thanks for your time today on the podcast. Be sure to check out hickorygrove.org. You can find Clint there and all of his sermons. Great preacher. and encourage you to do so. I want to thank you for listening today. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform that you're listening on. When you do, this helps the podcast grow. And as we grow, we're able to help have more conversations just like this one with some of the best leaders around, like Josh and Clint across the country. Thanks for listening today. We'll check you out on the next episode.